Welcome to the module on fermentation. I am with my dear friend Summer Bock, who is the fermentationist extraordinaire, who's just like the person in the space here. And she's here to help us do this and do it right. A lot of people are afraid of this, and you shouldn't be. Summer, welcome.
Thanks. I'm excited because everybody needs to know how to ferment.
Agreed.
Everybody. So we're going to start with kombucha today. Kombucha is an amazing fermented sweet tea. And first you have this, what is this? What is this nasty looking thing? I'm going to show you. This is a SCOBY. And some people call it a mushroom. Some people call it a baby, a mother, a mama, yep. A mama baby, a baby mama. Like all these different names for this cute little mushroomy, maybe gross, kind of slimy thing.
Alien octopus kind of thing.
Right? I'm very fond of it at this point because I've worked with it so much. But what this is it's a symbiotic community of bacteria and yeast. That's what SCOBY stands for. And there's organisms in here that create this cellulose that allow all of them to live together inside of this gelatinous blob. So we have it hanging out here in what you call a SCOBY hotel, where it's chilling. I'll show you how to make a SCOBY hotel. But that's gonna hang out there while we get the whole sweet tea thing ready. First off, we're gonna boil water, and then we're gonna add tea, and we're gonna add sugar, and that's pretty much the start. And then we wanna let it cool off for a while because we do not want to burn the SCOBY.
These things are alive.
They're alive. They cannot survive above pretty much 105 degrees. So that's why we're gonna let it cool off first. So boil some water. And while we're doing that, I'll just say, you need your jar. We have a half-gallon jar here. I have some scissors to cut off the little tags. You need oolong or English breakfast, some kind of black or green tea. We have sugar. I use turbinado because it's got some of the minerals in it. It's still not totally refined. And then I have a spoon here to mix in the sugar. This is a cloth to put over the top of the jar when we're done, and a rubber band to secure it so that fruit flies do not get inside. And that's pretty much the supplies that you're gonna need.
Cool. Cut to, now our water is boiled.
All right, so we're gonna try to do this without breaking the jar.
These things are pretty resilient, right? Like
yeah, the ball jars are very resilient. Any of those like jars that are meant for canning, they tend to not break. If you get like a mayonnaise jar that wasn't designed for hot water, you can have some problems.
Yep, and we don't want that.
No, we don't. So as you can see, I'm not gonna fill it up all of the way because we want room for the SCOBY. Once we put that in there, we need a little bit of room for that to fill up. We don't want it to overflow. I'm just gonna trim off these little guys. I have 4 tea bags.
4 tea bags. And you said oolong?
Oolong or any black tea. I prefer oolong. I think it's the nicest flavor. And so that I always use oolong at this point. But experiment, you can try anything. There's all different kinds of teas. Like hibiscus works really well. I've seen people do it with nettle. But the key thing is that these little bacteria and yeast that live in here, they eat sugar and they need some of the components from the tea. So like the tannins and some of those delicious little alkaloids, that's what they're feeding on. So it's important to make sure that you at least use black tea or green tea.
So tea leaf.
Tea leaf, like Camellia sinensis. Like you have to use this plant at least every few times. If you start doing herbal kombuchas with no caffeine, no tea in it, they get tired, they get worn out. It's gonna change the composition. So maybe every like 7 to 10 times if you're doing an herbal tea, switch it back to the tea so that it can actually survive and grow and do what it's supposed to be doing, what it's been doing for thousands of years.
You know what's interesting is like this thing is our friend. Like this will be a family heirloom that could be passed on, right? Like this isn't like a one and done.
Well, I mean, that's what's fascinating to me is like you can't just go make one of these. Can't.
Someone has to like gift it or you get it, buy it, right?
Right, so when you're like this, like these same organisms, this SCOBY was alive over 1,000 years ago, maybe 5,000 years ago.
Wow.
I mean, that's what's happening. It blows my mind. So
ancient stuff. Okay, so we got 4 tea bags in there, in our jar. And again, you all should be doing this along with us as we're doing it, or watch it and then come back and replay it. But like, let's make our kombucha now, right? Like we're going to create these things. And so in the next few weeks, as the course keeps going, we're gonna come and revisit this so that by the end, you're gonna have all sorts of delicious stuff to share with your family and friends.
Yeah, I'm just adding the sugar, a half cup of sugar here. and gonna let it dissolve. I'm adding it when the water is hot because it dissolves easier.
Sure.
Simply. I'm just gonna stir it up, and then we are gonna let this sit until it cools off and it's ready to add the SCOBY.
Important. Sit until it cools off. If you put your SCOBY in there, you kill the thing, right?
That's right.
So
it has to cool off.
yeah, how cool? Like cool to the touch?
Cool to the touch, like your body, 98 degrees, right? So if you can touch it and it's comfortable, I mean, like right now, too hot. If it's comfortable, if you need to, you can get a thermometer. I mean, you can always check. But if you can touch it, if you can like put your finger in it and hold your finger in there and it's comfortable, it's totally fine.
You're okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, that's the cool thing about ferments, right? Like you could pull out some gadgets, but people have been doing this before we had thermometers, before we had all this stuff. They just figured it out and used their own senses.
Right. And so, okay, so now we need this to cool down before this action happens. So in the interest of time, what we should do is maybe kind of push this over, do some other ferments maybe, and come back to this.
Sounds good.
Yeah, great. Okay, we're back. Here's what you need for the kefir. You need your jar, a bowl to strain into, a strainer, your kefir grains, which you should already probably have by now, and some milk, ideally, grass-fed, healthy, good milk. Now this thing is just a container. The person that gifted these kefir grains to me gave, it was in water with just the grains, and this thing was in my fridge, and we're reactivating it now and bringing these colonies back to life. Off to you, Maestro.
All right, so what I'm gonna do first, I'm gonna strain out the kefir grains. I'm gonna show you what they are. So similar to the kombucha SCOBY, these are little tiny SCOBYs. They look like cauliflower florets made out of gelatin. They're kind of funky. And these little guys here are inside this little strainer. And I used a nylon strainer. I actually prefer the nylon strainer for kefir grains because it's very, very fine mesh. So you're not gonna lose little tiny baby kefir grains.
This is valuable stuff.
Valuable. And then another tip, this is a big tip. Most people do not know this. They don't teach this anywhere. We figured this out through trial and error. But if you massage them and you kind of break them apart when you're straining them, it helps them repopulate and grow faster. So you break them apart, they have a lot of fun, they get a more surface area, and then you're gonna have more kefir grains to give your friends and family.
Great.
So really recommend doing that piece. So we're just kind of breaking it apart there. And at this point, honestly, you can rinse them, and some people don't recommend it. If there's chlorine in your water, don't rinse them. There's mixed thoughts about whether you should or not, but I prefer to rinse them.
Okay, so, and we have a whole house chlorine filter here, so
yeah,
no problem. So I'll rinse them over here. Is it good?
That looks great.
Yeah, great. Okay, all right, so we're rinsed up, ready to go.
So they're all rinsed, looking cute. And at this point, I'm actually just gonna plop them in here. Okay,
clean jar.
And there's various measurements. People say like a teaspoon per cup. I mean, a tablespoon for this amount, it doesn't matter, it's going to work.
Just tell me what to do. Yeah, people get really, really anxious about the specifics because they don't want to mess up. We're gonna help you do this, but the fear of messing up is a really big deal. Look, you do it once, twice, a couple times, just follow what Summer's saying here and it just works. And if not, we troubleshoot and we help you make it work. But once you got it, it's kind of easy.
Yeah, it really is. You just have to work through any, fails or anything that happens and figure out what happened there. This is 2% milk. Whole milk does work, but it can get a little intense because you get all the cream rising to the top, and sometimes it can separate. So 2% milk, or if you can get fresh goat milk, raw milk is actually the best. So if that's legal in your state, if you're able to acquire some raw milk, the kefir grains love raw milk. They will multiply faster, they'll get healthier, bigger, just fluffy, gorgeous. So that definitely, if you can get raw milk. But if not, I go for 2%. And that's it. I mean, literally, that's it.
Swirl it around.
Yeah, and put a lid on. A plastic lid is also pretty nice too, because this is going to get acidic. As it's breaking down the milk, the lactose in the milk, it releases lactic acid. And the lactic acid is what helps to preserve it and let it last over time. So that lactic acid will react with the metal. It's okay right now, but you're going to want to shake this up a little bit. you can swirl. You don't have to like sit there and violently shake it,
Right.
but let it swirl around and do that maybe a couple times a day, especially when your kefir grains are new to you and you're just figuring out what they need. But when you swirl it around, it helps to get the lactic acid to permeate throughout and become a homogeneous mixture, and it helps get the like new fresh milk touching the kefir grains.
Got it. And so twice a day, swirl it around.
That's right.
You sealed this right now.
Well, I sealed it, but there's a lot
Just
of
a
room.
swirl. Got it.
So I know that there's enough room, because when I said they release lactic acid as they're fermenting and digesting the milk sugars, they also release carbon dioxide. So you can get pressure buildup. Some people actually do that on purpose if they want theirs to be fizzy. So that is a choice, but in general,
If not, you just burp it a little.
Yeah, you just burp it. And I just kind of tighten it on there for this, but I won't tighten it really tight.
Got it. You'll leave a little room for it to.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you want to let it sit for 24 to 48 hours. Some people go a little bit longer, but it's really up to you in terms of taste. So after 24 hours, taste it. See if you like that flavor. When people are just starting fermenting, oftentimes they like younger ferments. They don't want it to be as sour. And that's just part of adjusting your taste buds, getting your body used to all these bacteria that are coming in. So it's okay to let it go a little bit shorter when you're starting out. And then over time, your taste buds might develop, mature, and you acquire that taste.
More time equals more lactic acid, which means more sour.
Exactly.
Basically. Okay.
And kefir is different than yogurt. This isn't going to get thick. It'll get thick-ish, but it's a drink. It's a dairy beverage, And I have to say, the milk kefir that you buy in the store is not this. The milk kefir that you are buying in the store is made out of powdered starters that has 1 or 2 of the organisms in here. There are dozens of probiotic organisms in those kefir grains. So you're getting this like full spectrum probiotic versus what you buy at the store is industrial made. They put powder in it, 2 strains, maybe 1. That's it. So it's a kefir-like beverage. It's not real kefir. And I think that's so important for people to understand. You have to make this at home to get the real benefits.
Yeah, and that's the tradition, that's the beauty.
Yeah.
So a couple questions. One, you leave this out?
Leave it at room temperature.
Room temperature, 24 to 48 hours.
Yep,
then taste it, and then you can put it back in the fridge when it's ready? Or
So that's actually a great question, because my recommendation is that you don't put it in direct sunlight. You want it to be in a warmish place. It helps it do its thing. But you can put it in your pantry. You can stick it in a cupboard, or even just on the countertop, out of the way. But really, when you're done with it, you want to do what I did here, where you strain it out, but you don't want to be putting these guys in the fridge.
The grains.
They don't need to be refrigerated. Yeah, you strain them out, and then once this is done, strain them out, put them in a new batch of milk, and then put this in the fridge, your finished product.
Yeah. So you strain out your grains, put your grains, keep them going, and we'll talk about like putting your grains to sleep if you're like doing something. Like, what's funny is like I'm literally moving in 2 weeks. Yep. So I need to like transport these like baby birds.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
love
We'll
it.
talk about how to do it. Yeah.
Well, so with kefir grains, I actually think that you really just need to keep feeding them. So if I'm going to put mine to sleep, like I have some that are asleep in my cupboard right now, I just feed them once a month. I might strain out a little bit of the milk. Maybe every once in a while I'll do a fresh batch. But I've had them sit there for 4 months without even feeding them, and they're fine. I find if you put them in the refrigerator, it slows down the growth, and it takes a while for them to activate. Whereas when they're still sitting there in the kefir, they do really well.
And then, so if I wanted to preserve them in the kefir, I still have to strain them out, and then I put them in a jar. I put them with water.
I leave them in milk.
You leave them in milk?
I leave them in milk.
Got it. So
I mean, it's kind of crazy, and I know a lot of people are going to be like, what? You have milk sitting in your cupboard for 4 months? It does fine. I'm not going to drink that milk.
Right, but the lactic acid keeps it from going nasty.
There's no mold. You won't see anything weird about it. It'll just be really sour. There'll be a little bit more liquid separation, so you'll see like whey and curds essentially.
But that's sacrificial milk. Like you get your stuff out, you dump the milk, and then you keep going.
That's right.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so now that stuff, a lot of people have a challenge with cow milk. Let's talk about dairy alternatives, goat, sheep, coconut. You know what I mean? Like, how far can you go?
Yeah. Okay, so goat milk is an awesome. I mean, any kind of milk. You can feed them any of the milks that you just mentioned. You could make breast milk kefir. I know people who have done it.
That's kind of hardcore. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really hardcore.
Awesome. Yeah.
That's another level.
Yeah.
But in terms of milk, these dairy kefir, they love dairy. They need that lactose. So if you want to make coconut kefir, which I have done, you can do it for about again, it's like 7 to 10 times. They start to shrivel. They don't look as healthy. They don't look as vibrant.
Feed them milk.
But then you feed them milk.
Got it.
So for people who are very, very sensitive, what you would do is you would rinse these and you put them in coconut milk, and that first batch would be a sacrificial batch, because you might still have some remnants of casein or whatever on the grains, and then you throw it out, and then that next batch will be fine.
Got it. And then within 7 batches, go back to giving them some milk.
They need milk.
Or let them sleep in milk for a while.
Yeah, and another option, and we could do this some other time, would be water kefir. You can do water kefir, and that's something where you ferment more like fruit. It's a sugar ferment, but you can do fruits and things like that. And
the same bacteria will thrive on those sugars for a while.
That it's a totally different SCOBY and all different kinds of probiotics.
So these, it's not with these grains.
Not with these.
Got it.
I have made coconut water kefir with these, where I just take coconut water and put them in, and just 24 hours later, boom, there's some delicious, coconut water kefir.
Huh.
It's awesome, but you can't, they look terrible. They get pink, they get shrivelly, they're like, help me.
You're grinding them, yeah.
Yeah. They're like, we did it. Can you please give us some more milk? Yeah.
Now, okay, I'm done working for you.
Exactly.
So this is 24 to 48 hours, depending on your taste for sour.
Yeah.
On the countertop, check it, taste it, smell it, and when you're done, strain your grains, rinse them or no?
I always rinse them when I put them in next batch.
Got it.
That's just my preference. Yeah, it works better for me.
And for a guy who's moving, and I want to transport these, can I just put them in a jar of milk?
I think you should just take this with you.
Yeah.
Do this about this full. Take it with you. Maybe in the car if it's hot. Check on them. Burp it.
Got it.
That's it.
And then when I get there, dump the sacrificial batch, the carrier batch.
Yes.
Right. And then go back to making more.
That's right.
Love it.
Yeah, super simple. And then you can put them in smoothies. You can just drink it straight. Dairy kefir is one of the most studied ferments. It has so many amazing properties to it. They've seen anti-tumor effects when they've used dairy kefir in mice, like major reduction. It's really profound. And then also babies in Russia are fed kefir if there's no breast milk available for them.
And they grow up fine.
They grow up great. Yeah.
So the history of kefir is interesting.
It is interesting.
Yeah? You want to give them a download?
Well, we talked about this last time, but what is your download on this? Because I feel like we have two slightly different stories.
So the story I know is there was a village in Bulgaria,
yeah.
right? And who knows which one started first. There's a village in Bulgaria where it had the most centenarians, and they had all these people that were just super healthy, vibrantly alive. There was pictures of guys in their 80s, sitting around like young guys on a wall, and they're like, what's going on here? And the one commonality was they were all drinking this drink. And so they're like, hey, give it to us. And they're like, we can't. And so at some point, and this has been going on for thousands of years.
They were very protective.
Very protective.
Yeah.
Someone snuck out some of the grains, and these are remnants of the same colonies that are thousands of years old that eventually got out of that village and are like the elixir of health and life for these mountain-dwelling centenarians. That's a story that I know.
This is how people used to get their probiotics. They didn't take probiotic pills.
Of course not.
This is the whole food version of probiotics, And the other story that I know about it is how they were formed. So it was believed that people, back in the day, they didn't have Tupperware. They didn't have these glass jars. So they used stomachs of animals. Mm-hmm. They used, intestines, like parts of animals, as storage containers for milk. And so the people of this area, they relied on their animals to feed them. And they'd care for their animals. And so they were putting the milk in these stomachs and letting it sour so that it would last longer, because they don't have refrigeration, right? Over time, they started noticing these little weird growths, these little gelatinous blobs, and somebody was like, okay, wait, and they just started plopping it in the next one. And over time, they just it became this symbiotic relationship between humans and this milk and these bacteria that were probably coming in through the actual milk itself and the stomachs maybe.
Right, the gut bacteria of the animal.
Yes, and their environment and everything. So it was just this spontaneous,
Unbelievable. And this is like a symbiotic food that has co-evolved with our ancestors.
We keep it alive, right? It wouldn't exist without humans, and it wouldn't exist without the animals that help keep it alive. And then it wouldn't exist without these bacteria. So there is this symbiotic relationship. And if we stopped caring about it, if it didn't have benefit for us, we would have given up on it.
Yeah. So this is like the Olympic torch of health.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like,
if you can't do dairy kefir, it's fine. There are other alternatives, but if you can handle dairy, this is definitely one of the premier ferments.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. On the shelf or somewhere on the counter, 24 to 48 hours. Taste it, drink it, strain out first, drink it, enjoy it, and then just keep going. Right.
That's right.
Awesome. Let's move to the next one.
Let's do it.
So yours might not be cool yet. We're just cutting forward a little bit so that we can show you how to do this, but this is now comfortable. When yours is, do it. So watch us here and then do the rest of what you're gonna learn here.
Yeah, it feels good, right? Like
it's
nice.
Nice.
Like you can see, you can wrap your hands around it, you can hold, you actually kind of,
yeah.
It's lovely temperature. That's what you're going for. So first off, I'm just gonna take these tea bags out. Obviously, if you're using loose tea, just strain it out into another container. Pull these babies out. And so now you have sweet tea.
Right.
Essentially, we just made sweet tea. But
cooled,
now,
cooled sweet tea.
Yeah, I think, so now we're just gonna take this and add our SCOBY into the mix. I mean, this thing is great. So the cool thing is you can really just add in any size. It's gonna float to the bottom, that's normal. And then as it's fermenting, it will develop a new SCOBY on the top layer that's the exact shape of the jar. So you can actually see the shape of the jar. This was either in a bowl or a very large jar, and see how it's a perfect circle? That's because they float up at the top and they create that cellulose, and they actually like sit and conform to the shape of the jar. So that's gonna happen for you at the top. So right now it's just kind of like in there, but it's gonna infuse and they'll rise up, and then you'll have a baby to give to someone else. Now,
and this is yours. You keep the mother colony. The baby you can now gift to the people in your life that need it.
Yeah, and you're going to have so many that you'll have mothers and babies to, and you can create a hotel to let them live in while you're fermenting with one. I'm going to add a little bit of the already done kombucha tea, and the reason is because it's acidic, so it's going to help acidify this, prevent anything from happening. That's the whole thing with fermented foods, is that the acidity, whether it's lactic acid, or in this case there's a little bit of lactic acid, but there's usually more acetic acid, which is vinegar, and that's created by the acetobacter, which are in that SCOBY.
This smells like vinegar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right, and the mother smells like vinegar as well, and you'll get vinegar strand, or well, really they're yeast mothers that will start to form these strains of like brown goo that will sometimes end up in there. You can use those for sourdough starter. I mean, there's so many cool things that you can do with this. But at this point, you're gonna just let it hang out. I always recommend putting over a cloth. You can't put a lid, you need air. Acetobacter is an aerobic bacteria. It needs that air to be able to do its thing. So then, you just put a rubber band over it, and that's gonna keep fruit flies out, and you let this sit for 7 to 10 days. The longer you go, the less sugar will be present. So that's kind of a key component of this, is understanding there's a relationship between, first of all, you're starting with sugar. You have the black tea, which has caffeine, right? And then over time, the yeasts in here are actually gonna make alcohol. So they produce alcohol, they digest the sugar, and then the acetobacter take that alcohol and eat it and turn that into vinegar. So there's like a multi-stage fermentation process happening within here. And like there was a big kombucha company, they had to recall all of their kombucha because it had too much alcohol in it, and they were just selling it on the shelves. I don't know if you guys remember this, it was like years ago, and all of a sudden everybody's like, where's my kombucha? It's not in the store. Because they had to pull it all. It was above the legal limit of alcohol.
So people are just getting drunk on kombucha.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, but if you leave it longer, that alcohol content will start to diminish, but it'll taste more vinegary.
Exactly.
Yeah, so they just needed to sit it.
Yep.
Okay, and so that's for you right now doing this, 7 to 10 days. Do you just taste it in 7 days and be like, okay, what does this taste like?
Honestly, when you are just starting out, I recommend just taking a little spoon in there and tasting it every day. I want you to start to understand what that process of fermentation tastes like. Just take a little sip, see as it progresses, because you might find, I like it on day 6, or I like it on day 14. It can keep going. I mean, you can let this go all the way until it's complete vinegar. You can use it as a salad dressing. I mean, sometimes you go on vacation or you forget about it and you come back and you're like, oh no, it's vinegar. Oh yay, it's probiotic vinegar. Like you can use this in all of your cool like cooking, you can just add it to anything for this flavor.
At what point are you scorching your SCOBY? Like you can't go over vinegar, it's fine.
No, and it so that's how you make a SCOBY hotel. So all a SCOBY hotel is straight kombucha. It's an already fermented version of it, and you just pour it over the scobies, and you just let them sit. Put a cloth over it so nothing can get in, and you can just put them in the cupboard indefinitely.
They'll just keep living and growing.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, as long as no mold gets in it, as long as you're like paying attention, you might need to add a little bit of tea, make sure it doesn't evaporate, make sure you push them down, keep them below the water line. Mm-hmm. Then, yeah.
So the air doesn't land and the mold spores don't land on it.
Because what will happen is that baby will form at the top and it seals it. Mm-hmm. And so then, yeah, all the mold can grow on top. So you want to just keep kind of like dusting.
So you dip the baby.
Dip the baby. Dunk the baby.
Dunk the baby. Okay. and like if I see a baby up top here in these 7 to 10 days,
you don't really need to dunk it at that point.
So this is for like
that's long term.
Yeah.
Long term dunking.
Got it.
So like a SCOBY hotel is a very important thing to know about, because when you end up with tons and tons of these SCOBYs, you're like, what do I do with them? Stick them in a hotel, and then when your friends come over, start trying to offload them. Yeah. Teach them how to make it. This is such an easy process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know. And talk about giving the gift of health, right?
Yeah.
Hey, check out this wonderful thing. I made it. I made tea. I made sweet tea and put this thing in it, right? And now you can drink it and take it and pass it on to your people, right? And so it's just, it could go viral in your community, help people.
Yeah, well, and it definitely. And one thing I want to say really quick about the probiotics here is that this is going to be different than what you buy in the store. Because in the store, you don't know how some of these companies are making it, first of all. Second of all, most of them add probiotics in. They like patented probiotics. They like buy them from these huge corporations and add it so that they can say, oh, this is probiotic. Because it's questionable, is Acetobacter a probiotic? Saccharomyces is a yeast that can be considered a probiotic, but they want to like make sure that they can say, this is probiotic, we have Bacillus coagulans in here. But they don't naturally occur in kombucha. So they're kind of creating something a little bit different. I think it's important to know that. The other thing is people, when you say probiotic, people think of lactobacillus, right? It's like one of the premier probiotics that we've studied, and people use it for all kinds of digestive issues. It's in yogurt. I mean, it's everywhere in fermented foods. It's actually only in about 20% of SCOBYs. So you'd have to do a test. You'd have to look maybe under a microscope or send it in to see if you have lactobacillus in yours. It doesn't matter, but I just think it's really important to understand the kinds of probiotics in kombucha may not be exactly what you think they are, because it does vary from SCOBY to SCOBY.
But I mean, I could get lactobacillus from my other stuff.
Yeah, you get it from your sauerkraut, you get it from your kefir, and then with this, you're getting this vinegar that's going to help with digestion. You're getting all these different organic acids, and I mean, there's amazing compounds that are in this, bacteriocins that are created and create like an antimicrobial effect. Not enough to be an antibiotic, not enough to like kill off everything, but they call it narrow spectrum antibiotics, these bacteriocins, and they're created by these probiotics and by these organisms, and it kills off any competitors. So it's going to help actually, nurture and grow the right microbiome. It'll help kick out some of the guys that you don't need in there. So it has this nice quality. I mean, you're really helping to like feed the right bacteria and say, hey guys, you're not really wanted here. Like, get out.
So, all the stuff we talked about with the biocidals and the stuff with, the biofilm that's created by the bad guys, you're taking something that's slightly acidic and flushing and constant. If you're drinking this regularly, you're creating an environment saying, this is the neighborhood I want to establish, right? And then you're supporting it with the probiotics that are in here or in the kefir or wherever else you're taking probiotics.
Yeah, and the organic acids that are in these fermented foods are almost like fertilizer for your microbiome. And that's how I think of it. It gives them more nutrient, gives them more to grow and flourish.
So there's it, 7 to 10 days. Take a spoon to it every day. Just make sure, nothing looks funky, no fruit flies on it. And 7 to 10 days later, this is kombucha. Figure out, your taste, and then you take the SCOBY and just do another one or park it in a hotel.
That's right. And then there's an advanced step. We're not going to do that today, but you can always do a second ferment, where after that 7 to 10 days, you strain it out, you get the SCOBY out of there, and then you can add fruit, and then you can tighten it up, and you can get it to be carbonated.
Without SCOBY?
Without the SCOBY.
Okay. Now, just to be clear on the SCOBY hotel, like if I pull this SCOBY out, this is just kombucha. This is like, so if I just put the SCOBY in a jar, put a little bit of the same kombucha on it, and just let it hang out, it's fine. Just same thing. Just let it burp, make sure nothing lands on it. Great. So you could store your SCOBYs, or you could just start making tons of this stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Awesome.
Perfect. Easy.
Okay. Kombucha. All right, let's start with some sauerkraut. Summer has a special recipe here. We're going to show the simple way to do it, and let's have some fun with it.
Sauerkraut is my favorite ferment because it doesn't have allergens. So, when we're talking about kombucha, some people can't do tea. You talk about dairy kefir, some people can't do dairy. So for me, this is one that you can tailor to your food preferences, your taste, or your food sensitivities. And it has amazing probiotics. I mean, in the end result, you're going to get at least a dozen different probiotics into your body.
And where are they coming from? Just like living on the cabbage?
We're not going to add a starter.
Right.
So the first two that we did, we had scobies, we had starters, we had bacteria and yeasts in there. Right now, we're going to rely on all the bacteria that are just naturally living on these fruits and vegetables. And then we're going to use the anaerobic environment. I'll explain that in a minute, and that will help create the environment for them to grow. And then also, I mean, we're not putting on gloves here. So we have lactobacillus on our hands that will get into this ferment. So we're going to help shape this in a very unique way at the same time.
That's fun.
I think it's super exciting.
That's fun. And it's important, like look at supply chain of your food. Get clean organic stuff for this so that at least the soil had healthy bacteria. If you're having some GMO sprayed stuff coming into your house, then it's not going to be as good.
Well, I mean, and the more you ferment, the more you realize how important the health of the soil is. The healthier the soil, the healthier microbes that are living in that soil that will then coat your vegetables. So to me, this is just such a great way to get people learning more about what we need to be doing with our food supply, right? Like we have to have healthy soil. We can't be spraying stuff on it because we need those bacteria there to make this the best ferment possible.
Totally. It's like a chain of custody.
Oh, it's amazing.
Let's do it.
Let's start out. We're going to chop this cabbage. I used to own a sauerkraut company. I have chopped a lot of cabbage in my insane amount of cabbage in my life.
She knows this stuff.
So you want to take out the core. It's pithy, it's very fibrous. Just get that out of there, and that will help your ferment go better. And then I always take the outer leaf off just because it's often kind of funky. And then at this point, I'm going to shred. So you can do it any size you want. So now I'm just quartering it there.
And you're going to get cabbage everywhere. There's a lot of moving parts with sauerkraut, so you'll have a kitchen full of stuff going on.
And I'm not talking because I'm like, I better not cut off my fingers today.
Yeah, that's a sharp knife.
It is a sharp knife.
That is a sharp knife.
This is the final container that we're putting in it, so I'm just going to be mindful of how big that is. You will be surprised, though. You can get a lot in a small space because of what we're going to do to start this fermentation process. So that is, I think we'll just start with that. I think that might be enough.
Okay, and you can go bigger jar, bigger load here, right? But make sure you know where it's going and how much you work with, right? So this is the size we're going into.
Yes. All right. Everybody has their special ways of cutting onions. I don't do all the fancy things. But onion is amazing to put in a ferment because onions have prebiotics. It has inulin. Inulin will feed the bacteria, and it actually selects for the good bacteria. So really a big fan. If you have been failing at your sauerkraut, you have to use onion in it. I mean, try it out. It will make a big difference. I try to do the onion, personally, I try to do it a little bit more fine because I want it to mix throughout the ferment. But you can, literally, you can do any size. Like, you don't have to copy me here. This is a free form, game of fun experimentation. It doesn't have to be perfect. The main thing I would say when you're starting out is that you probably want to try to think about everything being relatively the same size, because if you have if I stick big chunk of carrot in here, that carrot's going to take forever to ferment whole, and everything around it is going to get fermented faster. So try to get them relatively the same size at first when you're just learning how to do this, so that you can have a ferment where every vegetable is done at the same time. It's kind of like cooking, really.
Okay, so you got cabbage and onion.
We have onions, and now let's grate some of these babies.
Just bang in here.
Yep.
All right, so here's carrot. Just do it in here? Yeah. Might as well save a step, right? We'll just grate this sucker. And we're gonna do 1 full carrot for this size, and just adjust your ingredients based on how much stuff you want and how big your jars are. And once you kind of get into a rhythm and you understand, how much of your fruits and vegetables will yield how much sauerkraut, then you have a lot more flexibility to play with it, right?
That's right.
Nothing like raw onions right under your nose. Summer, you're making me cry.
I'm moving the onions. I need them to go away.
I just get really emotional.
I'm having such a good time.
So good.
By these ferments.
Raw onion is actually like, in my culture, Persian culture, like when you're eating like a meat dish, you'll chew on a raw onion just right next to it. Ooh. Yeah. My wife and I have like a deal. It's like yes or no. Like we both have to do it, or else or else one of us is just going to stink too much.
You.
Yeah.
You have like a little hand signal.
Oh yeah. Table. Like, are we doing this? Okay, so we got carrot, and then you want me to grate this. This is just half a green apple that's peeled, just so that we're faster, right?
Yeah, and the green apple adds a really nice flavor to this, but we don't want to put too much fruit. Fruit fermentation is definitely an advanced step. When you're just starting out, like it can get moldy, it can get yeasty, it can get alcoholic. You just want to be a little bit careful with it. We're going to put a very small amount compared to the overall. And if you look at this, think of it as a salad, and the cabbage is the lettuce. And you're adding condiments, you're adding garnishes to that salad. That's the best way to figure out what proportions of things to use. And then, we're also going to add caraway seed.
All right.
Caraway seed has a nice flavor. It's great for digestion. It's going to support this just lovely ferment in so many different ways. And then we do salt. So at this point, this is where we really get the fermentation process going. We're going to use about a tablespoon of salt here. And then you mix it in, and what the salt does is it starts to pull out the water and start to break down some of these cells, so that, if you notice, we're not adding brine. We're not going to add salt water to this. We're just going to use the cabbage and the water from these vegetables that's being pulled out by the salt. You can even see it's starting to glisten. Mm-hmm. Right? And so, think of this as like a coleslaw. You could even serve this up raw.
Right.
In about an hour, once more of the moisture comes out, this is going to be delicious raw. You want it to taste good here.
Huh.
Right? People will be like, oh, I've done this, you're in the super healthy mode, and you're like, well, I gotta put some spirulina in it, and I gotta put some cacao nibs, and I gotta put, you start just shoving all the healthy things about into one thing, and it can get kind of gross. You don't need to do that. This is such a healthy food. You don't need to go crazy and start putting tons of kale, tons of parsley, all these other vegetables. You can just keep it light. Make it taste delicious.
Some of my favorite kraut has always been the simple stuff, right?
There is so much to be said with simplicity when it comes to these vegetables.
So you're just massaging it in.
That's actually a good point. I was just kind of making sure I had enough salt everywhere. And at this point, I am going to just start to break it down a little bit further so that we can fit it in this jar a lot easier. And the massaging process is just going to allow there to be no air gaps. Because the air gaps, it's air. It's the ability for mold to grow. We don't want mold to grow in this one at all. We're actually going to seal this one off and let all the carbon dioxide fill up the jar and keep it in an anaerobic environment.
And if you can't fit it all in the jar, wait an hour or two and eat the rest as coleslaw.
Exactly.
Yeah, this looks yummy. I want to do this now.
I went to a potluck once and I didn't have anything. I didn't know it was a potluck. And so I show up and they're like, oh, potluck. And I had just come from a sauerkraut making class and I had all this ready in a jar. So I went and I took the jar and I dumped it in a bowl and everybody was like, oh, what is this?
It's the best coleslaw
This is the best salad I've ever eaten. I was like, oh, yeah, unfermented. I'm ready for you.
Yeah.
And look how wet this is getting. You see, it's totally creating moisture. So I'm gonna taste it. And you wanna taste it and see?
Of course I do.
It should be salty.
It's salty.
Good salty. Mm-hmm. It should be salty enough to where you want to take another bite. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I used about a tablespoon in here, but when you're riffing and you're at home and you're wanting to make up a new recipe, you're not going to know exactly how much you have, right? So you want to go for this saltiness where it's like, what could you compare that to? Like, I kind of think of potato chips. Like,
it's almost saltier. I mean,
salty enough to where you want another bite. It's not too salty, and you're like, oh, that's good, but saltier than most food that you eat. But then the reason is because that salt is going to get diluted once it ferments, because it's all the rest of the moisture is going to come out of the vegetables. So let's start packing it in here. So can you pull out the two little things in there? So this is a pickle-it jar. I love this little contraption. You can also use a mason jar and get an airlock, or you can just put a plastic lid on it. But what this is this is the airlock, and that's a little rubber stopper. So look at the top of the lid there. There's a hole that's been drilled in with a rubber gasket, and the stopper is for when it's done, you can put the stopper in. But this, we're gonna put the airlock in, and we're gonna add a little bit of water and create that anaerobic environment.
Okay, so let's stuff this thing.
So let's start stuffing it in. Now, my recommendation is to put a little bit in, and then let's set it down for a sec. And you just go ahead and start smashing it down early on. Don't fill the whole thing and then smash it. The bottom won't get as flat. So you just need to do a little bit at a time.
Best part is anything she spills, I eat. It's actually really good.
It's a really yummy one. The flavor of the apple, it just does something to it. The caraway seeds, like, oh, I just absolutely love this flavor.
It was great.
Oops.
And it's fitting. It's totally fitting.
Just to make sure my nose isn't running there.
That'd be amazing. Talk about ferments.
I'm gonna put some of my own fluids.
I know, totally.
Ew.
You know what happens.
I mean, already, right? Like, aren't you impressed at how much has gone in here? I mean, this looked very, very full. This jar is very tiny. And I hope you can see this. Let's turn it to the side just to see. Like, look at the moisture that's coming up. That's the brine. That's what's going to cover it and create the anaerobic environment. Similarly to how we talked about dunking the baby in the kombucha. The kombucha baby. Not your baby.
Not your baby.
This is that same thing. We want to keep those vegetables underneath the brine so that nothing gets in there, nothing ferments that shouldn't.
So the brine's going to create an environment that's safe for this stuff to ferment correctly in the, like, so can you explain anaerobic versus aerobic?
Anaerobic just means there's no oxygen. And there obviously, like right now, there's oxygen right here, but like every vegetable below this water line is in an anaerobic environment right now, and that's going to stimulate the growth of these bacteria. And there's a bacteria that starts out called leuconostoc, or leuconostoc, however you want to say it. And that bacteria is going to come in and start creating an acidic environment, preserving this food, and then it eventually gets so acidic that it dies off, it dies down, it doesn't replicate as much. And then the lactobacillus come in, because they love the acidic environment, so they get very excited, and there's just this cool succession of bacteria that in stages. And there's actually, the last stage is Lactobacillus plantarum, which is it's an A player in your gut microbiome, but oftentimes it takes a couple weeks for that to show up and really be proliferating. So, as you get more, like, I guess as you acquire your taste for ferments, then you can let it go longer and longer and have more Lactobacillus plantarum. But it's okay, again, to eat this after a week or 4 days if you like it. Just start with a tangy little light sauerkraut, and that might even be good for kids. Like they may not want that super sour at first, and you just want to introduce people to these flavors gently, and then over time, it's okay for you to go longer and longer. Your body will naturally acclimate. You're gonna be like, you know what, I want that to be more sour next time. You'll feel it. I learned this. This is like nature's addictive healthy food. You taste these probiotics, you get them in your body, and even if you don't love the taste at first, within a week, your body is like, more.
Yeah.
Give me more.
I crave sour. And the question is, am I craving sour, or am I beneficial bacteria asking me to get more sour for my environment, right? It's just part of it, right? All right, so this is it. We got, almost an inch left at the top of the jar. So she's obviously left some real estate for the magic to happen up top. And
yep, I left a little bit of room. This actually might be a little full, but so you would have to go in here. Let me take out a little bit. I want to show you guys exactly the right amount. I think this is just a little too full. I can feel the pressure of how that's better. So what's going to happen over that first week is this will bubble up and grow because of all the carbon dioxide will push the cabbage. So you can get a little glass weight that will go inside of these, or you can just come in here and once a day, just push it down. Like, get it down underneath that brine, keep it going, and it'll all bubble up. It's a really cool process.
So pack it down.
Ferment actually means to boil. Because it looks like it's boiling this way.
Just in the little
it'll go where it needs. No oxygen can get in. Nothing can go in to do. You don't have to like take it out, put it in another jar. I'm like, oh, good, lazy cook.
Yep.
You know?
How long? What are we doing here? Every day, checking on it, pushing it down?
First time you're making it, definitely check it every single day and taste it. I want you to get used to what is happening during that process. That's how you learn. You learn through your senses when you're fermenting. And then, if I was going to ferment this, I would probably go about 10 to 14 days because it's such a small little jar. The bigger you go, the longer you have to ferment. But yeah, 10 to 14 days. I mean, you could go easily up to a month. No big deal.
Countertop,
covered,
just out of the
pantry.
sun.
Out of the sun.
Out of the sun, let it burp up, and just go in and just keep pushing down so that the material stays under the water line.
That's right. It's such an easy process, and it's so delicious. And really, what I want people to do, I want you guys to experiment with new flavors and share those flavors with each other. Share those recipes.
We didn't use a starter. This is the bacteria that are there that are going to thrive and do their thing. And over time, this is going to get just more and more layered as different organisms thrive through the different kind of eras of acidity.
Yeah, as they break down, they create those bacteriocins, those organic acids, all these unique flavors. So it gets more flavorful, more floral, more complex the longer it goes.
Love it, love it. And look, if at first you don't succeed,
try again. Yeah. This is an easy ferment. People fail. There's different reasons why. Mold can happen. Honestly, truly, if mold happens, you actually can just scrape it off and eat what's underneath. And that's how they did it back in the day. I do this just because in my house, it keeps my house from smelling as strong, and it guarantees me to not get mold. So, I kind of prefer this method now, but it's not as hard as you think, and some people have found that they may even have like mold in their house if it's getting moldy every time.
That's interesting. So it's almost like an ERMI, like this will diagnose your house.
Totally. Yeah. So yeah, there are some things that can happen. There's also one called calm yeast, which is that white flaky like layer that forms on top. You can scrape it off, put it in the fridge, and usually it goes away at that point.
Put this in the fridge. So once you have that, scrape off the top layer, put this back in the fridge, and then that won't come back.
Yep.
Usually.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
One way you can tell that it's done is that obviously the texture changes. It gets more bendy. It's not hard sauerkraut anymore. It's still very crunchy, and that's what the salt does. It makes it stay crunchy. But look at the color. It's translucent. It's turned from a green to more of a yellow, and it's sort of opaque. Like you can see my finger through that piece of cabbage. Right? And so that's one way to tell. Like to me, that's like, this is done sauerkraut. When people are just starting out, oftentimes they're going to like it when it's just speckled. So there still might be little like hints of white or green, and that's still fine to eat at that point, but that's just not a completely done ferment. This is what you look for in a completed sauerkraut.
So the translucent, and obviously this is just cabbage. We've added some other ingredients here.
Right.
But this just cabbage, you want it to be translucent as part of it.
Yep, that's what you look for.
So here you have it. This is finished sauerkraut, 7 to 10 days for this size. You go bigger, you go longer. Play with it, follow the tips, check it every single day. Each of them have a different shelf life, counter life. Same with the kefir, 24 hours to 48 hours. The kombucha, we're gonna check, in about a week. We're gonna keep playing with it, tasting it, sipping it, just making sure that we find that sweet spot. All of these resources will be put in the member site for you, so you know where to buy all this stuff. And then we're gonna see you in the live question and answer session coming up now.
Can't wait.
Okay. Live. We're waiting to see. We had to do a very special dealio here because we wanted to pre-record this thing. So let me just, if you can hear me, go ahead into the chat thread and let me know that we're here and live just to verify. I'm going to look for it myself here. So let's just wait and see. Cool. All right, I see us on the other one. And we had to do a very special dealio here because... All right, so it's just a little behind us, but we're in. Cool. Summer, hello.
Hello.
Nice to see your face.
That's nice to see your face. I'm so excited about this.
Cool. So let me do a little explaining here. So Summer was in Southern California, a month ago, basically. And we filmed this in the kitchen of my old house because we wanted to get 4 weeks ahead of y'all so that we can show you what some of these ferments look like. And we took the risky stance of saying, let's do it and then patch it into a live feed and then jump back in live, which makes things a little bit more complicated. But thanks to the wonders of technology and a genius named Lorenzo, we're all good. And Sean is watching and he says we're here. So here's how we're going to do it. I had the tech team put a comment thread right under this video for you to put your questions in. And Summer and I are going to just let you all put your questions in there real quick. Leave the volume on. Obviously, you can just scroll down the page and do that. And we'll get to them from oldest to newest kind of thing. And I just want to show something off while you're doing that. This right here should look familiar. It is only half full for a very good reason. My kids love it. They've been getting into it, man. I was just like, hey, no, I need this for the Daddy's TV stuff. And they're like, but Daddy, can I just have a little bit? And the ultimate test for me is that Soul loves it too. My daughter, Sophia, will just have like pickled caterpillars with she's just like has this really interesting pickled palate where she'll have just all sorts of funky stuff at a very young age. My son will just not so much. Loves this stuff. So it's a total win, Summer.
I'm so excited. I actually am surprised at how many children love it. And the funny thing is, I used to sell sauerkraut, so I'd work in the farmer's market and I'd give out samples. And people would, be like, oh, okay, is it safe for babies? I'm like, yeah, sure. And so their babies would try it and they go like this. They go, and they like shiver and make this face and then they reach for more. And it was just always surprising because they get that full visceral reaction and then they want more. And we have video of babies eating entire jars of kimchi, just like with their hands, the spiciest kimchi. And, a lot of parents worry that their kids won't like it. But I think as long as you don't make it this weird thing, as long as you're not like acting strange around it. I had one person I suggested, she's like, my son, he doesn't always eat what I like to eat. I was like, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go home. You're going to ferment this, put it in the fridge. Don't talk about it. Don't say a word. Just eat it as you eat it. And he's going to ask you for some. And she came back later and she's like, oh, he won't stop eating it because she made it somewhat mysterious. And then he got curious and it was on his own volition.
So don't force it on them. Make it mysterious and they come back for more.
That's right.
So good. Yeah, the fact that I had to keep this and protect it for our video today made my kids want it more. It was something. And so so here's a little more background. I'm 1 for 3 on this one. The SCOBY and the kefir grains that I had in my fridge were about 8-9 months old, like held in water. And when I told Summer, she's like, I don't know, those are tough. And so we said, look, let's just give it a try. The kefir grains are not dead, but the first batch, I just kept kind of feeding them milk and then dumping it. And so I have they're in a SCOBY hotel, if you will, or a kefir hotel, if you will. And so they're back in the fridge now that we're kind of settled in the new house. I'm going to do it again. The kombucha, the SCOBY had kind of run its course and was a little moldy. So now that I'm in the new house, Summer's going to hook me up with, where to get the new SCOBYs. And hopefully she'll come over and visit and bring one herself because that would be the ultimate gift. And then we'll start it again. It was actually doing pretty well. And then I'd say 6-7 days into it, it got moldy.
Yeah. And that was, and just to make this clear to everybody, first of all, fails happen. It's a part of the process. It's because we haven't learned this generation to generation. It's not being passed down. You're not watching somebody do it every single day. And so there's these fails that happen. And I just don't want people to get discouraged about that. Take pictures of the fails, take pictures of the mold, share that. I think that's important so that people start to see what that looks like. And it becomes so obvious when it's not working. But once you learn what you did wrong, it's really easy to get it right. And once you get it right, it's hard to mess it up. One thing I would say with the reason that SCOBY, the kombucha, didn't work for you is because it was in the fridge. And so that's just like a big key reminder. These these little scobies don't really like to be refrigerated. So with that kombucha, if you're not going to make kombucha, you want to leave it in a kombucha hotel, which we kind of explained, and I can show you, well, I'll show you real quick one of mine, like a finished kombucha here. And you're going to freak out because it's full of scobies.
Oh, come on. It looks like alien brains.
It really does. And I put it in this continuous one so you can just, drink what you want. And this was almost empty. And so I refilled it with the sweet tea and it just keeps going. So they call this a continuous fermentation. And after a while, you have to clean out the spigot because some of the SCOBY will get in there. But this is just a super cool thing. And I actually just simply use paper towels and a rubber band over the top to keep any fruit flies out. And I'm going to just show you guys really quick what I think is so fascinating that we weren't able to show you on the first one is the way that this gets the shape of the jar. So you see I'm pulling this up and I'm just going to show you here. Set a bowl on my lap so I don't drip this all over myself. But I pulled off that SCOBY and look, it's a perfect square shape, right? And so that's how they do. They fill the jar. And obviously this one's like really filling the jar. Like I need to give these away, but I'll bring you one. I'll hand deliver some SCOBYs to you, some square SCOBYs.
Ultimate gift.
It's delicious. I can smell it. It's so good. It just smells ready to drink right now.
Yum.
I can't wait for the day that we can like text scents over
totally.
over the internet. That's my moment I'm waiting for.
Yeah. I want to smell that SCOBY. So let's just jump into some questions and we'll go from there and we'll cruise. I know they're going to kind of pull us here and there anyways. So we'll talk about probably all this stuff. Beth is just saying thanks. It's been life-changing. Right on. Thank you, Beth. Thank you. If it wasn't life-changing, I wouldn't have made a series about it. It had already changed my life, and then making the series changed my life again, and my life keeps changing. And so it's one of those things that, I said during the series, and I'll say it again, people keep asking me, they're like, okay, so you spent, a year and a half doing all this work and hanging out with people like Summer and all this, like what probiotic should I take? And we now know beyond a shadow of a doubt that is the absolute wrong answer. The answer is to live probiotically. And so everything Summer does in her kitchen is that way, right? Everything that I'm doing out in the yard is that way. When it comes to spraying the weeds, when it comes to, shopping at the grocery store, it's like, how probiotically are you living? And so, it is life-changing. And so thank you, Beth. Poonam is saying it's hard because of the time zone. She's in the UK. And so, sorry, it's just the times. I mean, I'm literally like, my wife is putting my kids down so I can do this. So unfortunately, there's never a good time. And that's what replays are for. But again, having you hear it live would be much better. Ideal circumstances. Question is, in the kombucha recipe, we mentioned white sugar. Is it okay for health in general, or can we use it as another substitute? And we spoke to this in the video, obviously, a little bit. This was like a pre-video question, but if you'd like to add to that, I know you talked about turbinado and other sugars.
The main thing with kombucha is it feeds off of sugar. So you want to use some type of sugar. You can get a less refined version like turbinado, sucanat, those all work. But the problems start occurring when you try to use things like honey, maple syrup, molasses. All of these things are just a little bit, there's too many minerals, too many other enzymes competing, maybe even like with honey, competing bacteria, and even antimicrobials in the honey. So you want to respect the ferment, right? So if sugar isn't your thing, you can look towards ferments that don't use sugar as a way to feed the organisms. And I will say that there's a relative of kombucha. It's called Jun. It's Jun. And you can use green tea and honey. And for whatever reason, it's just been, growing with green tea and honey for thousands of years. So it has, adapted. And that's how it thrives and survives. So if you want to get away from the sugar, you could go more towards using a Jun SCOBY and make that.
Let's also speak to that a little in terms of where that balance is. We spoke to this a little in the video as well. But So you're feeding the sugar to the bacteria, and so you're either going to ferment it longer and have less sugar, more alcohol, right? Or ferment it shorter, have more sugar, less alcohol, or is there somewhere in between? Like
It's somewhere in between. Yeah, it's actually you can have less sugar when you go longer, and it will actually, if you let it go long enough, it'll be less sugar, less alcohol, because the alcohol will convert to acetic acid, so it'll be more sour, more vinegary.
Got it. So on that continuum, you burn out of your sugar, then the alcohol will then convert to it'll vinegarize basically, and at that point, that it's just a flavor profile. Like if you could tolerate it, it's got less of either of those.
Exactly. And I mean, we can get really techie here. There's these little devices that you can use. They use it when they're making wine to see how much sugar is in grapes. It's a refractometer, and you could use that to see how much sugar is in your kombucha. And that could be one way to determine. I'm going to make a video on this on YouTube. So I'll make sure and share that with you, Pedram, when I get done with it. Because I want people to be able to figure out how much sugar they have in their kombucha easily at home.
Yeah, and just, it goes without saying, follow Summer and her work if this is like fascinating for you. And so we might as well just say it here. We'll do it again at the end. But like, where can they follow your stuff?
Gutrebuilding.com. I've got blog posts, freebies, programs, everything. Just go to gutrebuilding.com, and everything links to what you need to learn more about this topic.
Yeah, awesome. And if this is your song, like, this is your girl. It's that simple. So Maria's saying, I want to know about the spices that can be used in fermenting. And it was about an hour ago, so it's kind of right at the beginning. So what spices are, like, I know we've used dill in the past. Are there things that are basically not allowed because of what they do, or?
I'm honestly sitting here racking my brain trying to think of a spice that you can't use. And the only thing I would say is you just want, when you're using salt, you don't want to use iodized salt. So make sure you're using sea salt, Celtic sea salt, Himalayan, whatever kind of salt that doesn't have iodine added. It's not iodized. That's the only thing I can think of. I've experimented with, all different kinds of spices. And in fact, what I've noticed is that spices enhance the fermentation process. So use it all. Use curry, use asafoetida. I don't know if you've heard of that, but use any amazing spice, coriander. We used caraway in the kraut that we made.
It was delicious. It's delicious. I'm looking at it. I almost want to just cheat and eat it right now. It's really good. We've had like avoided eating it because of this thing here. So Rosemary's saying, I have water kefir grains. I don't know if that's a comment, or is there a thing around water kefir that you have to ferment differently?
Well, water kefir is a little bit different. Yes. It's a particular ferment. It's actually a really amazing ferment. It's similar to kombucha. It's kind of in between kombucha and dairy kefir. The grains, the scobies, look like dairy kefir kind of, but they're a little bit more like crystals, a little bit more square shaped. And they eat sugar water. But then you can do ferments with fruit after, like a second ferment with fruit and things like that. The nice thing about water kefir, it has about 23 different probiotics in it. So it's a nice, diverse beverage. But we didn't cover it in this program. I cover it in some other programs that I teach, but we didn't cover it here.
It's a little harder too, right?
It's a little bit harder. Yeah, they sometimes they go bad. You've got to get it just right. They need a little more special care. You have to add like a drop of molasses and like a lemon slice every once in a while to get the minerals in that they need to stay alive. So there's a few extra steps, and it's not as easy as the ones that we did today in this class.
Yeah. Rita is asking, it's more of like a thing question about what did she say kind of thing. The grains, do you say they're in gelatin?
No, I said that they feel like gelatin. They're gelatinous, and that's it's not actual gelatin. They're spongy because of the cellulose that is produced by the organisms living in there. So it's similar to, that SCOBY that I just held up. It's just this squishy, it feels like hard Jell-O, but it's not gelatin. It's just natural.
Yep. Yep. Maria's second question, lives in Costa Rica, hot tropical country. How many days do I leave the fermented cabbage on the counter? Usually it's about 30 to 32 degrees Celsius, which is pretty high in high humidity. So how does she modulate based on her environment?
I've actually worked with a lot of people in South America and just on the equator. And what we've noticed is that, sauerkraut is going to be a much shorter ferment for you. When it's going to be, the ambient temperature is much warmer, you're going to want to ferment maybe even like 3 to 10 days is what we found for a lot of people. I also would recommend for you in particular to be using things like garlic, onions, and chili peppers. It adds some support and help. It's antimicrobial. It'll keep yeasts at bay. So definitely add some spices to yours, especially if you can handle spice like red chili flakes. Add it. It's going to help. We've seen, some more fails around it fermenting too quickly in tropical environments. And so let's just try to help aid that process with some of these spices.
Yep. Mark, do pickles have as much of the probiotic benefits as sauerkraut?
Pickles do have the same probiotic benefit as long as they are lacto-fermented. So that means that, and we didn't cover this, this is a lot more advanced step because, pickles are another one. There's a little bit of a learning curve there. But the pickles that you buy at the store are usually preserved using vinegar. They're just literally they put vinegar and spices and garlic and then plop the pickles in and just let the vinegar, preserve everything. It kills off all the microbes. But again, that's not going to be a probiotic pickle, right? So you don't want the ones with vinegar. You want to lacto-ferment it, which means you have to make a saltwater brine. And you then add the spices and the garlic. And you need to add either grape leaves or you can even use tea, any kind of tannin. You need something with tannins in it to make it crunchy and help, preserve this whole process. It's a key part of it. And let it go for, it depends on how many you're making at a time, but let it go for a period of time, let it ferment, and then you'll have crunchy, delicious probiotic pickles, which I'm a huge fan of. And in fact, I'll show you right here because I'm really into my show and tell tonight for you guys. So these are actually carrot pickles. So I did the same thing that I just explained. I created a brine and I peeled the carrots because I really wanted to make sure everything was good, but I left the tops on. And by doing that, I was able to make sure that all the bacteria that were in the tops were going to help with the fermentation process. Because if you peel the carrots, you're actually getting rid of a lot of the bacteria. So I just leave the tops on to aid in that fermentation process, get all the good probiotics in. And I actually grate these on my salads. And it just is the most amazing flavor. And I mean, you can always eat them with anything too. They're delicious. But yes, probiotic carrots, probiotic pickles. You can make pickles with peas. You can make okra pickles and just so many different kinds of vegetables that you can just literally pickle using salt water, and it makes it sour and preserved and probiotic.
Summer, I got a question for you. How hard is it to get people to get out of your house? I have a feeling like people just show up in your kitchen and just start browsing and going, ooh, and then you're like, dude, I don't have any more left for me.
It's true. I mean, it's definitely a science experiment in my pantry. And sometimes people walk in there and are like, maybe you need to change the trash. I'm like, nope, that's my vinegar, because I have all different kinds of vinegars going in my pantry and it can get really strong, especially in the summer. But I've just gotten really known for my salads. Whenever I'm making food for people, can you bring your salad? They're like, can you bring your summer salad? And I'm always adding some sort of ferment in. I'm like sneaking ferments in, and people don't know, but I sneak it in because it provides this flavor that just people aren't used to. And then obviously I think their bodies just crave more. Can I show you the vinegar?
Yes.
This is another one here with just some science, laboratory quality. Okay, so this is red wine vinegar. I literally feed this bottles of red wine. Or if you get to the bottom of the wine and you don't finish a bottle and you have that and you're just done, pour it in there. Like the next morning, even 2 days later, you're like, I'm going to drink it. You don't, pour it in here and it will convert it. And this is the same thing. It has this amazing square red vinegar SCOBY. This is from Spain. I mean, it came over from Spain decades and decades ago. And here I've got it, and I just keep it alive by, it's my little alcoholic.
Man, that's fun.
It's so cool. And I don't know if you can see, but this one really produces a lot of SCOBYs. And this is the best vinegar I've ever had. I mean, hands down. You put this on a salad, you make salad dressing with this, you make it, my specialty, greens. So I'll do 4 different kinds of greens. I'll make kale, chard, spinach, and I'm missing collards. And first I caramelize onions, and then I add all the greens, and then I add this and salt. And it is, I sound like I'm bragging. I'm not trying to brag. It is the best greens I've ever had, and I owe it to this like homemade red wine vinegar. It's outstanding.
How much bacterial content remains in the vinegar doing it this way? Like, are you still getting a good probiotic bump?
Okay, so this is a really great question, because when it comes to vinegar, we have to question whether it's probiotic or not.
Right.
We have bacteria in there, the Acetobacter. There's all different kinds of Acetobacter. There's some Acetobacter in kombucha as well. That's what gives it that vinegary sour flavor. But the Acetobacter aren't necessarily probiotic, but they produce a preserved liquid, or a liquid that you can preserve other things with. So it still is a ferment. It's still amazing, and there's many health attributes. I mean, there's this whole apple cider vinegar craze. And many of those health benefits that have been studied are showing that it's supporting digestion because it gets your gastric juices flowing. That sour flavor stimulates the vagus nerve. All the juices start flowing and you can digest your food more fully. And it helps with blood sugar levels. So it keeps your blood sugar from spiking. It slows down the emptying of the stomach. There's so many amazing things that it does. People say it boosts metabolism, things like that. So there are definite like supportive health attributes to vinegar. But I wouldn't call it probiotic. And in fact, if you add vinegar to sauerkraut, or you add vinegar to pickles, let's say you even added some, you're like, I want to, whatever, just preserve it. I don't know, if you're being weird and you make this lactoferment and then you add vinegar, you can actually kill off the probiotics. So there's too much. They can't stand the acidity of vinegar. It's just a little bit too acidic for our healthy probiotics. It's not going to kill them when it hits your stomach. It's fine. It's going to get diluted with all the food and all the other juices going on. But I think it's supportive. Helps with digestion, has some other benefits. It's going to help you actually pull more minerals out of your food. So when you add it to greens, it's going to help pull out those minerals. And then the fats that you add to those greens as well is going to help you absorb the vitamins that can only be absorbed through fat. So, it's an excellent condiment, an excellent food, addition, but not probiotic.
You're like in love with it. You can't let go of it. You keep looking.
I know.
at it.
I'm like sitting here touching it,
looking at it. You're like,
well, I started naming my SCOBYs. So these are my little kefir grains. I named them Kermit, actually after a person's dog. Anyway, it's a long story. I don't know. I just name them. Like I named this kombucha one Sarah. Hi, Sarah.
Sarah.
They just, I realized I need to have a stronger bond with them, so I started naming them.
That's great.
So I freak flag fly here.
Yeah, that's it. Well, listen, these are life forms, right?
Absolutely.
These are life forms, and they have, anything that's alive has sentience, in my opinion. So, Eileen's actually she's a little late, and we did speak to this a little, Eileen, but we'll just say it here because she was just holding up the kefir grains. Is if you have dairy sensitivity. Will milk kefir grains impact that? And, we spoke about coconut milk and some of the other things. It'd be good to kind of tighten that up a little bit again, though, just because so many people have dairy issues and so many of our people in the course just got off an elimination provocation diet, right?
I actually have casein sensitivity, so I can't eat dairy kefir, which is sad. I make it, I give it away, but I can't personally handle or tolerate casein. So if casein intolerance is your problem, dairy kefir is just never going to work. If lactose intolerance is your problem, dairy kefir is actually a great option. As long as you ferment it for about, 48 hours, you could maybe even go further to 72 hours. Usually by the 48-hour mark, that lactose is going to be gone. And the crazy thing about kefir, and I've read this in various studies, is that when you consume kefir, even if there's still some lactose in that dairy, the bacteria, as they go through, some of those bacteria, as they go through your body, some of them are going to like break apart, explode. Some of them don't pass through digestion. Some of it make it through. As they do that, their enzymes are released. And now you are given the enzymes to break down the rest of that lactose. So, I think it's a really powerful, very cool way of thinking about lactose intolerance. And, you've got to experiment with it, got to see what works for you. Obviously, some people are, maybe only able to handle just like a quarter cup or something like that, but it's worth checking out. And then if it's truly like something that you have to avoid, make coconut milk kefir, make coconut water kefir. You can use nut milk. You can use any kind of alternative milk. And I've experimented with all of them and it works. You can still use the same dairy kefir grains and get the benefit, but you need to feed them. I found personally about every 7 batches, you kind of need to add some milk. You could keep going longer, but every 7 batches, they get a little shrunk down, a little shriveled, starving. They're ready for some real milk sugar to keep them going. And it changes the way that they even grow. You'll notice, like when they put them in raw milk, they get white, they get thick, they get plump. They get this like really yummy film all around them. When you put them in coconut milk or some of these nut milks, they start to just shrivel and start to change color a little bit. They start to look either a little bit pink or a little bit brown. And they just don't have that. They don't grow, they don't multiply. But they're still fermenting it and they're still producing a ton of organisms.
Raw milk, unpasteurized milk, because when you pasteurize, you kind of kill the lactase and some of these other things that would help this process along. If someone could find an unpasteurized product, I think you said you recommend that, yes?
Raw milk all the way for dairy kefir grains. They love it. I've seen them thrive better in raw milk than anything else. But if you don't have access to it, use 2%, the highest quality milk that you can find.
Got it. When you get too many scobies, it's a great question. Minette's asking, can you feed them to your chickens if you have them?
If your chickens will eat them, yeah, feed it to anything that will eat them. A lot of people, as you can tell, I'm getting SCOBY heavy over here. You give them away to people. You can make SCOBY, like people make kombucha SCOBY jerky. So they marinate it in various flavors and make jerky. So you could just eat it. It's cellulose. It's basically plant matter, bacterial matter in this case, but.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. Sorry, I just lost my thing here. Pregnant women, can they eat the fermented products?
As far as I know, that's something you'd want to check in with your doctor, but every doctor I've talked to has said yes. But again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to sit here and give medical advice, so definitely check with your own, but every doctor I've talked to has said that should be fine.
Yeah, if you're having
you can take probiotics.
Yeah, but if you're having some histamine intolerance and stuff like that, sometimes the OB-GYNs freak out. This is really rare, and I've never seen anything wrong with it. Again, talk to your doctor, but I don't think it's a problem either. So Eileen got a SCOBY from a local organic market a few days ago. I didn't realize it should be refrigerated. Has she read it?
No, it shouldn't be refrigerated.
Right. So that's what I did wrong, Eileen, is someone gave me stuff and I literally had it sitting in water in the fridge for months. And he said, you're going to have to shock this back to life. And we tried and it was too little too late. It should not be refrigerated is the answer.
Yep. So take that out of your fridge right now.
Yeah, totally.
And if you don't, good. And just make some sweet tea, plop it in there and get it going. Give it the environment it needs.
Awesome. Bonnie was having some trouble finding the replays. The good news is they're right. If you go up to the top of this page now, you'll see week 1, 2, 3 all the way across. If the week is past, the replays should be in there now. The transcripts are coming. The audio is coming. A bunch of other resources are coming. This is because it's a live course. We've been kind of building it as we go. And so this is the first time we're actually in the environment that it lives in now. And it's just going to get more and more robust. So yay. Minette, want to do sauerkraut with dill and garlic? Can you put them in at the beginning, or do you wait on the dill until it's fermented? Great question.
I want you to put all the vegetables in at the same time, because we don't want to mess with the pH changes that are happening. We don't want to introduce new bacteria in, at a random stage in the process. The main thing you want to think about is the size of the different vegetables. That's the only consideration. If, like, for example, you saw my carrots, they were all whole, but everything in there was the same size. So it's going to ferment at the same time. So it'll all be done at the same time. You don't want big chunks of carrots, those size, and all really finely shredded dill and finely shredded cabbage. Because then, it's just, you're going to have, all the cabbage will be done and the carrots will still be pretty raw. So just, that's the only consideration. Make sure everything is a similar-ish, diameter or, size. But yeah, put it all in at the same time at the beginning. Great.
Veronique just got some store-bought SCOBY. Again, questioning if it should be refrigerated or leave it out and combine it with oolong tea. Many thanks. So yeah, what do you leave the SCOBY in? I mean, we already said you can't refrigerate it. Yeah.
Can't refrigerate it, but you just want to stick it in some sweet tea. If you have kombucha, then you want to actually, if you can add a little bit of kombucha in there, that will help. The SCOBY Hotel is essentially fully fermented kombucha. So you just leave it in there, right? You're not doing it, you're just adding sweet tea, leave it in there till it ferments, and then it's the SCOBY Hotel now. Right? And you just want to make sure that it doesn't dry out, it doesn't evaporate. If you need to add more tea, you can add more tea and let it just keep going.
When we talk about the SCOBY Hotel and the fact that you're so abundant now, right? Like you just got so much SCOBY coming out of your life. You get your first SCOBY, right? So Veronique goes and gets this thing, and has a successful ferment, and now she has kombucha. And then the top of that jar ends up, whatever the shape is, becoming another SCOBY. And then you start moving them. So either you start multiplying your batches or you start stacking them in a SCOBY Hotel and then sharing them. Yes? Close?
Yeah, you would, you just basically, okay, there's actually, you're kind of opening a can of worms here with that question. It's a great question. But the truth is there are some SCOBY, some kombucha fermenters who believe that you want to rotate out your SCOBYs. So they'll put the SCOBYs into the hotel and grab one that's been in the hotel for a while and let it, start fermenting the kombucha from scratch again. And so, some people rotate out, some people just stick with the same one and just, essentially keep taking the babies off and putting those in the hotel. And some people leave the baby, take the mother and put that one in the hotel. So it's really up to you and your style. You can find, Kombucha Camp with a K. She has a lot of information about the different ways that people use this. And, she's also a great resource for SCOBYs for people who are looking for that. And it's on, check out the handout that we gave you. It's on the handout with links directly to those SCOBYs. But yeah, there's a few different ways. I hate to not have just this cut and dry answer, but hey, it's pretty forgiving, so you have a lot of options.
Yeah, and look, there's schools of thought. So someone who's a player in the game understands that there are schools of thoughts and is respectful of that. So thank you for being that way, because that's important. Let me go over here. I just lost my feed. So someone who just wants to get started was asking, hold on, something happened to my feed. I got to load comments. And load comments. There we go. So Roberta, if you're just starting out, where do you recommend getting the SCOBY? And that was also part of the resources that we had put in there.
Yeah, check out the resources. I will say I maybe went a little bit crazy there for you guys. But I knew that first of all, you needed all of your ingredients and supplies all in one place. So I put them all in one place. I put links in there so you can find the links for everything that you need. Some of them are Amazon links. Some of them are go to other places like the Pickle It Company, for these little airlock jars. So all those links are together in one place. You have recipes, and that's all on the first page so that you can get all of the recipes that we did in the video tonight. You can do those with us. Everything you need is right there on the first page. That's all you need to get started while you're watching the video. And then as you keep scrolling through this, it's about 18 pages. I have the live cultures, the step-by-step, and the recipes for kombucha, dairy kefir, and sauerkraut. So you have basically the step-by-step instructions, all of it written out, so you can do this on your own, even if if you're pausing the video and you can kind of like follow along with this piece of paper. And then I talk about safety and troubleshooting, and I also share all the different probiotics that are in there, which quite honestly, I think is really, really fascinating to see what are the names of these yeasts, what are the names of these bacteria that are found in these organisms. And then we have things like coffee kombucha. Anyone? Coffee kombucha? Like you can actually experiment and make some coffee kombucha. And I put the recipe in there for you guys. I have a hibiscus booch recipe, so you can make kombucha with hibiscus, and I have some cheese recipe for dairy kefir. I mean, I went all in. I wanted everybody to be really excited, and just because you learn how to ferment, but then there's a way that you take it into the world, right? You do something practical with it. You share it with other people. You turn it into a beverage, or you add it to your meal, and you just take it to the next level. And that's what I really want to see people doing, is like, sure, learn how to make it, but then how do you take it to the next level, right? How do you actually incorporate this into a meal and serve it to your family? And I mean, those are the pictures I want to see. Those are the things I want you guys to take a photo of, tag me on Instagram. I want to see what you come up with.
I love it. I love it. You guys, she oozes like the enthusiasm about this too, right?
I'm
like it's just
so excited.
It's so good. It's so good. And that's the only way you get really, really good at it, is you got to care. Like it's just like it becomes a craft. You really want to like play and have fun and share it. And it's a gift of goodness. It really is. I mean, I've never run into Summer ever without her pulling some magic out of her purse or some Tupperware. She always has something, and she's like, try this. And it's like, oh my God, what is that? She's just, just like you're giving the gift of life wherever you're at. So it's awesome. Eileen's asking, when storing a SCOBY, does it have to be fully covered with liquid? Like, does it have to be submersed? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And you should, if that liquid starts to dry out, you should just add more liquid or push it down under the liquid if it's floating to the top. And I kind of noticed that, like, for example, this, red wine vinegar SCOBY, I noticed it's kind of sitting on top here. And I have a bottle of red wine, organic red wine, that I'm going to feed it. And I noticed, like, it's starting to see how it looks bubbly. Can you see that? Those bubbles kind of on the surface. It's not bad. It just looks like that because it's just growing and it has nowhere else to grow. So it's starting to grow upward. And so I was like, oh, okay, I need to submerge you. And so I just push it down and then it's back under. It's very easy.
It'll stay down. It's not going to just float up to the top like a...
It actually does stay down pretty well. It's floating a little bit, but it does stay down pretty well. Yeah. I mean, once you kind of break that seal, that seal is what's holding it up. And there's a little bit of carbonation that's helped pushing it up. And if you can just push it under there, then essentially it'll sink. And then the next SCOBY will appear on top after all the bacteria and yeast float up.
Got it. I see. Last question. We only got a minute left, so this is good timing. Is there a certain amount of these you should eat or drink at a time, like a cup a day, a teaspoon a day? Like how much?
Well, I've gone overboard on this. I was fermenting absolutely everything because it helped, but I kind of took the American approach, the supersize it approach, like, a little is good, more must be better, so I can just say from personal experience and working with thousands of people over the past 12 years that these, in my opinion, these are condiments. They're meant to be additions to meals. If you are in a phase where your body's craving it and you want to eat a whole jar of kraut, go for it. Just know that that's not going to be your norm. Your norm is a few tablespoons with a meal. With kombucha, in my opinion, it's a 2-ounce shot or a 4-ounce shot. It's a sipping drink. It's not something that you need to be downing 8 or 16 ounces of. Those 16-ounce jars that they sell at the store, for example, a lot of people are drinking full bottles of those. That's a lot of kombucha. That's a lot of kombucha. And when we believe, based on the way that people were making this back in the day, that they really were having small amounts at a time. So respect the ferments and respect how much is in them. Respect the potency. There's so many strains of bacteria. There's all these organic acids, all these bacteriocins and enzymes. You don't need a massive amount. It's more about, like you said, living probiotically and incorporating it in meals here and there, having a little bit with this meal and a different ferment with this meal. So don't go too wild and crazy. Don't go overboard. And I will say some people do struggle with histamine intolerance or histamine sensitivity, where their histamine levels get high and they have a hard time getting them to go down. Oftentimes this is rooted in gut dysbiosis or some sort of viral infection, and that can make it harder to tolerate a lot of ferments. So I've seen that with some of my clients too, where they actually discovered that that's what was going on because they went a little bit overboard with their ferments, and they're like, oh, why is my face flushing? Why am I itchy? Or why do I get a migraine? I'm just throwing that out there to just in case anybody has some sort of reaction like that. Maybe it means you need to back down.
Yeah, more isn't necessarily better. One more question for you, and then one more kind of shop question here, and then that's it after these last two. When you're doing a second ferment of kombucha, how much fruit do you add per cup, and how long do you let the second ferment go?
Yeah, we didn't go big into second ferments because sometimes this is where bottles start exploding. Second ferments are a great chance for you to add carbonation and add unique flavor. Again, there's not like a standard for this. I mean, first, I would say, let me just give you a basic answer. So if you're making about 1.5 quarts or so of kombucha, I would probably add about a cup of fruit to that for my second ferment. And because that's about what we made, so if you're making the amount that we made, I would probably add about a cup of fruit. You could do a half a cup. Kind of depends on the fruit and how sweet it is. You can probably do more with berries and less with something like mango, right? With mango, it's a lot of sugar. Do a half a cup of that. You want to think about the sweetness. This is all an experiment. You can use ginger. You can use lemon, lime, all kinds of berries, all kinds of fruit. It's really, really cool what you can do with the second ferments. And you don't have to let that go as long. And you can actually cap it. And this is where you want to make sure, like if you're using the bale and wire lids to do your second ferment, you want to make sure that you're off gassing. If you want that strong carbonation, you have to seal it to get the carbonation to go into the ferment, but you're going to have to off gas it. Otherwise, you might see videos of this online, but if you let it build up too much, and you pop that thing open, the whole thing will just start fizzing and emanating a ton of carbonation. And you might end up with like less than half left in your bottle. So make sure off gas, do that a few times a day when you're doing that process to just kind of check how fast is it fermenting. Some people in the second ferment also add like a tablespoon of sugar, but I don't. I generally want to let the sugar burn off. And at that point, I just want to let the fruit sugar come in and be what adds that additional carbonation.
Yeah. And it seems like it's a little healthier that way anyways.
That's my opinion, yes.
Awesome. Let me just answer this quick shop one with you, and that way we can kind of properly say goodbye with everybody. People right now are at this phase where they should be reintroducing foods because we're at the elimination provocation diet. We're at the end of it. I reintroduced dairy a few days ago. Turns out I shouldn't be eating dairy. And so what you do is you take a little bit, one food. So it's dairy, gluten, tomatoes. And for the tomatoes, if you do one of the nightshades and you're fine, then you could try like a couple other nightshades here and there. But the tendency is if you're okay with nightshades, you're okay with nightshades. And then you just start adding them back one at a time over 4 days. So the dairy for me, fortunately, I was like, oh God, bad. It's like I knew it. It was immediate. Like within an hour, it's like I'm gassy, I'm burpy, I'm not feeling well. It's like, okay, damn it. Proved it once again. Don't eat dairy, right? But then you still want to wait for all of the reactions to subside over those 4 days before you add the next one, because you're still hot. And whatever you eat, you don't know if that's actually what's setting you off or it's still the dairy. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum, which is even more annoying, is if you are if you are having a piece of, say, bread, and you're like, dude, I feel fine. And then on the other side of that, you leave it alone. 2 days later, you start getting a headache or your joints start hurting. You wouldn't know if you thought the bread was okay for you on that first day. So what we do is that 4 day latency period. So you have the bread, then you wait 4 days and just also see what's happening. Because sometimes there's a 3 day latency period and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I lit up. You would never have put 2 and 2 together to blame that bread. right? And so that's why the elimination provocation diet is really important to follow that way. It's annoying because it takes a while, but look, you already feel pretty good, and you're just probably going to not feel as well once you introduce those foods. So don't be in such a hurry to introduce things that punish you, right? And so let's just go, and I'm going to go through a lot of that next week with Dr. Singh as we go through kind of like troubleshooting some of these things. So much more to come. And then I will also, we're going to add Summer's list here. Sean, I just texted Sean while she said that, to add that list here under the resources, and we'll just keep putting more and more in here, and we'll keep building on it from there. Summer, you're my hero. I love you. You're great.
I love you. I'm really happy that you're making this available for people. I mean, just not just the fermentation, just the whole gut healing piece. I think there's nothing more important. I just read an article the other day that said, oh, it's believed that Parkinson's starts in the gut. And I mean, we're just going to continue. I know this for a fact. We're just going to continue seeing this for the next decade. They're going to keep saying, oh, wow, we didn't know this. This disease starts in the gut. We have to get this piece figured out. And I'm just so happy you've created a resource for people to do that.
Thank you. And look, if this is just like, oh my God, this is amazing, and you want more, she is the fermentation queen. So again, give us your websites and how people can find you. And she has training courses on how to become a fermentationist. I mean, if you just want to kick the tires all the way to, doing this for a living or whatever, Summer's your gal.
Gutrebuilding.com. Find all the links there. And then Instagram @fermentationist, just like it sounds, like nutritionist, but fermentationist. And I've got tons of pictures and tips and video links. So it's a really fun place to go if you want to nerd out. And I'm telling you the Instagram too, because I want to see your pictures. Take a picture of your kraut, take a picture of your kombucha, your dairy kefir, and tag me in it so I can look at it. I want to see what you're up to. And if you have fails, I'm not kidding. If you fail, if something happens, post a picture and ask what happened. Like, the best way to learn is to put yourself out there and say, this didn't work. I don't know why. Can you give me a hand? Most people are afraid to post their fails, but that's the moment. That's really where we learn.
Yep. Love it. Love it. Here's one win right here. Got a couple fails that are in some state of either garbage or recovery. And we're going to, now that we're in the new house, one of the things that I learned from the Interconnected series actually is I'm in a completely different environment, humidity, pollen, everything. And so we're doing all these things on the countertop and shifting it and allowing the bacteria in our ferments to be kind of the sentinel of what's going on out here environment, and I'll feed that to the kids, and it creates a really cool feedback loop for them to assimilate better into the new place that we're in. Fun.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Fun. All right, folks, thank you so much. We'll see you next week. It'll most likely be here. You'll hear from me on email, but nothing really broke, so I think we're fine. And so we'll be here, and then we'll continue to kind of live in here throughout the end. And I'll put a lot more in here once it's all said and done. So that's it for us. Lorenzo, you can cut the feed, and yeah, thank you, Summer.